Two top managers faced off at Stamford Bridge as Chelsea and Liverpool renewed their rivalry in this encounter that ended 1-1. Poch and Klopp displayed their new season tactics, but what exactly were they, and how was Enzo key? Well, let's start by looking at Chelsea in possession as they dominated the ball and also assess Liverpool's press. From the goal kick, Liverpool were pretty effective in their press. Chelsea's shape would split Silva and Disasi either side of the goalkeeper, allowing Colwill to move into the left-back zone, Chukwuemeka to move inside, and Chilwell to become somewhat of a winger. In these situations, Jota would remain fairly deep looking to tie up Gallagher, while Salah and Diaz would come in off the flanks onto the centre-backs, making that initial central progression difficult. This would be backed up by Trent operating in this zone where he could pick up Colwill if Sanchez did look to go out wide to him, whilst the rest of the side backed up the press. With more numbers on the left-hand side, due to having two of their defenders in the wide zone compared to just one on this right-hand side, when forced long, as they often were in these situations, it was to the left, but Konate consistently dominated in the air against Chilwell, making this build-up shape less effective for Chelsea. But in open play, things got interesting from Chelsea, as where they had a double pivot on paper, in reality, especially in the first half, it was more of a diamond, as Gallagher was the deepest man, with Fernandes pushing into an attacking midfield situation. This was an interesting choice, as Gallagher is more of an off-the-ball midfielder, who's most effective making runs into spaces, whereas Fernandes prefers to be on the ball. As a result, in phases of the first half where Gallagher was more isolated, Chelsea struggled to play through the centre. Liverpool's mid-block shape didn't make things any easier for Gallagher, as Jota was man-oriented on him, looking to prevent him receiving the first pass. Salah and Diaz also did not operate as traditional wingers in the defensive phase, with both looking to tuck in, as did the midfielders, so this front six of Liverpool's was much narrower, with the goal being to prevent play through the centre of the pitch, which they were quite effective at doing. And when the wide centre-backs got onto the ball, Diaz and Salah could press as needed. So Poch looked to make an adaptation early, as rather than build with this flat 3, Colwill would instead move into more of a left-back zone, whilst Chilwell pushed right up to become a winger. This would disrupt Liverpool's compact central shape, as there were now decisions to make. With Jota looking to tie up Gallagher, if Salah pressed Silva, Colwill would now have too much space to advance high up the pitch, and there was already somewhat of a 3 versus 2 beginning to form. But if Salah went wide, Silva now had room in which to move. And this may not look too dangerous, however, Silva is an excellent passer and there was already a potential 2 versus 1 against Trent in these situations, so this is something Liverpool would want to avoid. And if Jota pressed Silva, there was now the opportunity for Gallagher to receive that first pass, and suddenly the press of the front 3 of Liverpool's was made much less effective. What is important to note is that with Liverpool defending so narrow and Chelsea's back 3 shape, they naturally had the opportunity to create wide overloads, as they would often have a wide diamond whichever side the ball went to. So to counter this and maintain their compact front 6, Liverpool would look to shift across as a unit in order to prevent this overload. However, there were disadvantages associated with this, particularly with Salah defending higher and more central, as this would free the switch to Chilwell, and time and again we saw him making a sneaky run down the outside, where he could then look to attempt a cross or even a shot. There was a flip side to this, however, as if Chelsea did go for the switch and it was intercepted, Salah would now receive the ball and was isolated against Colwill, who was now operating in a wider zone, and this could lead to dangerous situations for Liverpool. And though not much play came through the centre for Chelsea, it was still important for them. Where Gallagher was initially the single pivot, Chelsea could have a double pivot, either statically with Fernandes starting in this position, or what we more often saw early in that first half was Fernandes beginning high, then dynamically looking to drop in alongside Gallagher. With Jota being man-oriented on Gallagher, Liverpool did not want a 2 versus 1 against him, as Fernandes is the danger man on the ball due to his ability to drive forward as well as his expansive passing range. So what we began to see in these phases is Gakpo being drawn to Fernandes to look to make it a 2 versus 2. And this is where the troubles began for Liverpool. Sterling, with his game IQ, would identify this space, and if McAllister did not move across in time, he would be able to receive and turn. And with Jackson consistently making runs in behind, he could either look to receive the pass from Sterling, or he would drag Van Dijk, making it much more difficult for the Dutchman to confront Sterling as he moved high up the pitch. This would be backed up by Reece James down the outside. So they were looking to create a 2 versus 1 against Robertson, and time and again we saw Sterling playing James for dangerous scenarios. So in a bid to deal with Sterling's availability in this zone, Robertson began to operate much more narrow much earlier. This was still problematic, due to Silva's excellent passing range, meaning that he could fire a flat pass into James, who would be in tons of space, especially with Diaz defending high and wide initially. So James, with his dangerous crossing ability, would still be able to put Liverpool in danger. So in the second half, Fernandes began to start deep much more often, and we saw Klopp look to adapt to this 2 versus 1 out wide by starting with Diaz deeper and wider in this opening phase to have more of a 2 versus 2. Liverpool had just 36% possession, so let's just briefly touch on what they did in controlled possession. Chelsea could be aggressive in their press, with Jackson looking to cover one centre-back, backed up by either Chukwuemeka or Sterling, depending on which side the ball was. This aggressive press was facilitated once again by the back 5 being willing to fluidly shift into a 4, as Colwill could shift to left back, allowing Chilwell to move high up onto Trent. And actually, in these deeper phases, Trent could start wide, however we saw him often invert alongside McAllister, and Chilwell was man-oriented with Trent in these early phases, so we could see him being dragged right inside the pitch. This is where problems could start for Chelsea, as it would once again mean that Salah was isolated with Colwill, who did do fairly well, but as we saw for the goal, this wasn't always ideal. And higher up the pitch, Trent could maintain his more inverted position, with Gakpo off the left willing to drift into these zones, while Szoboszlai could do similarly down the right hand side, or he was also more willing to drop deeper. But what we often saw was that Salah did not hug the touchline, often making moves inside the pitch and dragging defenders with him, and this would then create the opportunity for Trent to move down the outside and use his excellent crossing to cause problems for Chelsea. Overall, it was a strangely passive defensive performance from Liverpool, perhaps a continuation of Klopp's move away from uber high pressing, or it might be a bid to protect the midfield a little bit more whilst they wait on the arrival of a true 6. And I would love to know below what you thought of Poch's new setup. For the manager tactical scores, Poch looked pretty good in his first match against a top team, meaning he earns a 7, while Liverpool were not bad by any means, but in the second half in particular were not quite at their best, meaning Klopp gets a 6, but leave your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, check out this in-depth video where we take a look at how a player Chelsea let go, De Bruyne, became the perfect midfielder.